No coiners, pre-coiners, new coiners, shit coiners, wage slaves, debt slaves, Bitcoiners of all description. This is Daniel from the Bitcoin Citadel, and I'm here to talk today about KYC. For new Bitcoiners, this is one of the most confusing and anxiety-producing and sometimes psychosis-producing subjects of all. KYC means know your customer, know your client. It's a banking regulation, or at least it was in the beginning. And it was, sold to everybody as a way to, fight terrorists and, corral drug dealers and hold them accountable and don't let them use the financial system. Back in the 80s is really when it got started. I was born in the early 60s, and we didn't have any of that stuff back in the day. I think you had to show your driver's license if you got pulled over. That's about it. There was actually a culture about, from World War II, one of the memes was, Nazi Germany made everybody show their papers, and in Russia, you had to have your papers with you and show your papers. And there was a real culture in the United States against that, having to show your papers and have an identity card on you all the time, right? Well, KYC has turned that around, and now you have to have an ID to check into a hotel. I was asked for an ID to buy a soda at a bodega, So it really has come a long way, and the pretext of having to identify yourself and show your KYC information, all your personal information, your private information, to participate in the financial system is a relatively new thing, Like I said, started really in the 80s and has gathered steam since then. And you might say to yourself, if it's not this thing about drug dealers and terrorists, what is it? And there's a really easy answer for that. And it ties back to 1971 when Nixon closed the gold window and we went on the Fiat standard. And that's because in order to settle when you use a credit card, it takes a while, right? And if I'm going to, be a credit card company, give you credit, let you use that credit to buy stuff, I want to be able to try to get my money from you if you don't pay me. So I need to know, right, all the information I can in order to find you and extract at least some of the money that you owe me from you. And that's really what KYC is. The whole reason for it is because of this fiat debt and credit-based society that we're in. And we don't need that anymore with Bitcoin. And that's why, just like the nation state is going to change, and really most of the nation states are going to die, they're going to end. It's the end of nation states because Bitcoin is going to separate money from state, because we're in an information age, and the mega politics that made nation states attractive, the bigger you are, the more money you could spend on your army, the better off you were as a nation state. So you had welfare states in the West, like the United States, and you had communist states like Russia and China that would just maximize the amount of money they could spend on their militaries, because that kind of military, that kind of mega political situation was what the industrial age optimized for. It's not like that in the information age anymore, and Bitcoin is going to end it. The nation state is over, and the need for KYC is over. So if you're a privacy maximalist, right? If you're a privacy maximalist, and sometimes I think I'm going to start calling them black-pilled privacy maximalists. You don't need, the train is leaving the station, right? You're focusing too much on that, I think, and you could throw your hate my way if you want, but that's my feeling. Now, that said, do we want to have some KYC, non-KYC Bitcoin? right? And I think that's a great idea. And there's a lot of different ways you can do that. You can buy Bitcoin from a non-KYC exchange, private exchange like HODL. There's a bunch of them. Just either Google or use Perplexity AI to find which ones, and do that. You're going to pay a markup, which isn't that big a deal, but you are going to get fewer sats for non-KYC, and there's a premium on them because there's a lot of privacy maximalists who only want non-KYC Bitcoin. I can tell you a story about it. Maybe I will in the behind the scenes. You can buy Bitcoin directly from someone else. And here's the thing I want to say. One more thing before I end it today. I know people who are just KYC. Everything is about KYC. Listen, I bought KYC Bitcoin. I have Bitcoin and I bought KYC Bitcoin. Here's the thing that concerns me is that KYC Bitcoin has the address at the time I bought the Bitcoin, and I don't live there anymore, right? But that address is now part of the record of the exchange I bought it from, right? So a real concern is, if somebody gets that address, then they can send a thug with a wrench to my house and try to get my Bitcoin. I don't have anything in my house that ties back to the Bitcoin that I have, but that is a concern. And I think that's a valid concern, right? So if you've ever bought KYC Bitcoin, that is a concern that you have, especially if you bought a large amount, right? So you've KYC'd yourself already. People know you're a Bitcoiner, or people can know that you're a Bitcoiner, right? So there's one thing. If you want to have no KYC Bitcoin, because you're going to ignore that, if you're never ever going to buy KYC Bitcoin, that's the kind of person you are, then you can do it. You can buy Bitcoin from somebody else privately. That's KYC. Doesn't have anything non-KYC. Doesn't have anything tying back to you. You can use one of these no KYC exchanges like HODL. There's other ones as well. You can use RoboSats. There's a lot of ways to do that, right? But the bar is a little bit higher. You have to trust people, and you have to think that it's worth it. So for me, I do have no KYC Bitcoin. One last thing. I know I said one last thing a second ago. You have to manage that Bitcoin now properly, because you can't mix your non-KYC Bitcoin with your KYC Bitcoin. And that probably means, if you're like me and you want to set your systems up so they're easy not to make mistakes, right? You probably need another cold storage device, right? And wallets that are no KYC wallets. Like if you're using Sparrow Wallet, for example, you need to be really careful not to mix those no KYC Bitcoins with your KYC Bitcoins. So it's going to be a lot of extra effort. You're going to have to pay a premium for your Bitcoin. And I think in the long term, there's not going to be any KYC in the future anyway. So that's my feeling about that. Have a great day. Go to bitcoincitadel.net if you want to have a one-on-one consultation. It's free, value for value. Look my name up, Daniel, Bitcoin Citadel. Peace.